Good morning. This is Bill from Curious Cars on a rather lovely Florida Tuesday. You know, it's not bad. Again, the mornings and the evenings are pretty good. It's the middle of the day that just absolutely sucks. But firstly, let's talk about idiots on the road, because that's just something that's really been bothering me. I mean, there are apparently hordes of people out there who fully believe that their time is more valuable than everyone else around them. I've just been running into them nonstop. The vast majority of them seem to drive newer BMWs or older Hyundais or even Nissan Altimas purchased with ridiculous interest rates. And, you know, as a guy who got out of the car retail business, I can tell you that there's a whole contingency of people, a bunch of people, who would pay anything for a car as long as their payment was correct. I mean, there's people out there who'd pay $1 billion for a 2016 Nissan Altima as long as their payment made sense. And, you know, God damn, am I so happy to be out of that world, let me tell you. But that's an aside. I mean, look, despite Hurricane Ian's best efforts, the Northerners are down. They're in the stores, they're on the streets. I look at them as I'm walking through Trader Joe's or Publix, and, you know, obviously some of them are probably Canadians, but they're hard to spot. Unlike the Germans, they're much tougher to spot. They can perfectly mimic normal snowbirds right up until the moment they make an offer on your car, and then you know, oh my God, I've been dealing with Canadians this whole time. I'm kidding. Anyway. But why come? I mean, honestly, it's hot. It's absolutely hot and miserable. Never mind the storm recovery. It's hot as balls. It's bloody hot. Humidity is a little bit better, but the tropical sun will absolutely bake your scalp off, and it's November, you know? I don't know why I signed up for this shit. Honestly, I really don't. I know that I would be better off somewhere else, but, you know, here I am. There have been very few animal encounters. Even one of Peter's cats came up to me earlier this morning, and he didn't look pissed off, so I let him be, and that's fine. I'm not going to cry about this. The goats are gone, obviously. They've been gone a long time. Peter's threatened to get new ones, but I haven't seen anything like it. So for the moment, there's not even deer on the road. The neighbors have obviously 30-06'd all of them, you know, and had some, you know, sausages made up. So nothing is out there except for a few birds, which are making a lot of noise. But yeah, at least we don't have airplanes, so that's something. It was really annoying to do that. A Japanese fire truck, and he had Pearl Harbor overhead. So, oh God. Anyway, look, back to the car. Let's just get into this thing, because I don't want this to be a terribly long video, since it's doubling not just as a Curious Cars informational thing, but also sort of an advertisement for an upcoming auction, which I'll get into. And this is a 1966 Plymouth Belvedere II hardtop coupe, and I feel very lucky to have it. This is one of those nice little stories in the car world. I actually bought this thing off the widow, which, you know, when you're in the car business, that becomes a thing. You know, people, as it were, they seem to pass away, and then they leave the stuff to the widow. The widow doesn't have any interest in it, so they go on and sell it. Unfortunately, widows, despite all popular, you know, ideas, have a tremendous idea of the value of these cars. So I had to talk her down a little bit to get her realistic. But I ended up buying this thing. I also bought her gun collection, some old flintlocks and other crap that I have absolutely no interest in. A couple of inert rocket launchers, which are cool. But otherwise, you know, I don't know. It's just kind of an interesting little facet of the car business. But look, we're going to dive right into this thing. And this is, again, a 66 Plymouth Belvedere II. And it actually is a fairly interesting car historically, which we'll get into as we go. Belvederes were made across 7 generations, from 1954 to 1970. Before 1954, they were a trim package on another car, but the first true Belvedere came out in 54, and they were initially full-sized. You could get them in sedans and wagons and coupes and that sort of thing. They eventually became an intermediate size, which this one is, and of course we'll get into why that matters. Possibly the most famous Belvedere was Stephen King's Christine, if you remember that, which was actually a non-existent four-door Fury in the book. I mean, obviously King, likes cars, but he doesn't know a whole lot about them. So in the book, it was supposed to be a four-door Fury. Well, there were no four-door Furies. It had a column shift, except they all had push-button shift. But anyway, that's an aside. God bless him. He made this Fury very, very famous, but Belvederes ended up taking the place of Furies for the most part in the film, because there weren't that many two-door Furies out there. The trim package on the Fury was quite erotic, or at least exotic, and the the Belvederes were more plentiful, so that's what they ended up going with. And even in the beginning scene, if you remember when the hood closed itself on the hand of that factory quality checker, which, oh god, that one just sticks out in my head as being, ugh. God, I think the guy probably would have rather died than have the hood close on it. But anyway, that was a Belvedere, and it was in bright red, or at least blood red, compared to all the tan and white ones around it, which were the true colors. In the Stephen King book, they ordered a special color for it. So, but anyway, I think that guy probably rather would have been killed. The movie also featured a '68 Charger, if I remember right, driven by the main protagonist, Buddy, which was a pretty cool car, and was also a B-body like this particular Belvedere, which of course we're going to get into. So anyway, so it started as a full-size car. They downsized it in 1962 at a time when bigger was thought to be better, so it wasn't really a great move financially. It hurt sales, despite the cars themselves being pretty highly rated by their customers. But these intermediate cars were built on the Chrysler B-body platform, which is a terrific platform, very popular mid-size chassis that underpins some of the best-known muscle cars of the era. The cars like the Charger, the GTX, the Roadrunner, as well as NASCAR legends like Superbirds, if you remember those things, and even NASCAR legends like Belvederes. Richard Petty, a guy you might have heard of, he won the Daytona 500 in 1964 in a Hemi-powered Belvedere, and frankly, that would, in a strange way, almost be the birth. Look, the GTO is the birth of the muscle car era, but when they started putting these things, those big engines in these cars, that was a huge step forward. So they fleshed out the size a little bit in 1964. They made them look a bit bigger and wider, and that certainly improved sales. But the true beauty of these cars was the lighter intermediate platform getting stuffed full of optional Mopar big blocks. From a 361 to this 4-barrel 383, which is a cool piece, up to the available 426 Hemi, which is, of course, legendary. Police departments loved them. They loved the mixture of power and maneuverability. Taxi companies liked the simplicity and fuel mileage, plus the room inside. And racers loved the ability, or the available horsepower per pound ratio, while everybody liked the price. So they actually turned out to be a pretty popular car. They sold well and compared favorably to competitors from GM and Ford, like the Fairlane and the Chevelle, that sort of thing. So this Belvedere actually did quite well. They were also a significant player in the evolution of the muscle car, with lightness and cubic inch-derived power becoming more desirable than weight, frills, and bling like had come before it. So the Pontiac GTO kind of made that happen. But the, cars like this on this B-body intermediate platform with big blocks, they really moved the muscle car along. But anyway, look, before we get into the specific car, I want to cover for a minute the events of 1966 and what was going on the day that this particular machine, was new and shiny. It's just sort of interesting to look back. The Department of Transportation was formed. Federal government signed in by Lyndon Johnson, and cars really have never been the same amount of fun since. I mean, Once they got their bearings about them, they brought in the 5-mile-an-hour bumpers, which looked like absolute shit. They brought in horsepower choking emission standards, which were an absolute shame. And ultimately, even the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit, which, as we all know, just absolutely sucked. So they basically killed the muscle car right in its infancy and supercharged us right into the malaise era. And that, I get it. Yeah, they made seat belts. They made cars safer. There was some good stuff they did. But for the most part, they just took all the fun right out of cars. What else do we have? Chairman Mao came out in 1966 and created this cultural revolution that started absolutely making everybody miserable. My sister has a cat named Chairman Meow, which I think is in really bad taste, but... yeah, what are you going to do? And I think it's just offensive and ridiculous. The Miranda rights came into effect of, the right to remain silent, the right to a lawyer, all that stuff. You didn't need to do any of that before 1966. Basically, what that did is give Hollywood a lovely dramatic moment for their movies and TV shows where they start reading off Miranda rights. I don't think anyone really gave a shit whether they had their rights read to them or not, but Hollywood certainly made the most of it. Batman debuted, as did Star Trek, and this was a pretty big deal because you basically had two vehicles launched themselves into popular culture, and they've remained there ever since. So that's kind of neat stuff. You have to give an honorable mention to The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. That also debuted in 1966 and has been played pretty much nonstop since then. It also gave me a very convenient name to call my lady friend, who can, honestly, she could suck the fun out of a holiday quicker than a house fire. She just absolutely has no Christmas joy. And even when I try to, look, I'm the last guy on earth to come up with Christmas joy. But when I do, she makes damn sure to just suck it out altogether. So really, really offensive. The space race was in full swing. You had the Russians perceived to be ahead at the time. They were preparing for a moonshot while we were just launching astronauts. Buzz Aldrin went into space and kind of dicked around a little bit, but the Russians were fooling around with the moon, so it really lit a fire under our ass. And frankly, it was a very good year for serial killers. You had a guy named Richard Speck. He murdered 8 nurses in Chicago. You had an ex-Marine named Charles Whitman. He killed 14 and wounded another 31 from a spot on the bell tower with a sniper rifle. So he was, doing his thing. And then in England, you had the Moors murderers, Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, and they're jailed for killing 3 children. So serial killers were doing their thing in 66. Movies, you had Thunderbolt. You remember that James Bond movie? You had Dr. Zhivago. Interesting stuff. Music, you had the Beatles, of course, making their, big swing in America, and of course the Beach Boys, who did very well. So basically it was just peak baby boomer all around. It was just, we were just inundated with stuff. You had Vietnam, you had the Beach Boys, you had the 60s, you had all the baby boomers coming of age. They've just inundated with us with that crap since I don't know, the last 40 years of movies. So I think it's time Gen X came out with a few movies of their own, but we'll see what happens. But anyway, look, I'm going to pause there for a minute, and then we're going to get into this specific car. So bear with me one moment. All right, so look, let's just jump right into this thing. So this is a 1966 Plymouth Belvedere II hardtop coupe. This is particularly interesting because, again, I bought it off the widow. This is not, it's the kind of thing you kind of hope to get when you're dealing in cars in Naples, Florida. You find a guy who just passed away, and then his widow sells you the car, and he had owned this thing since it was new. In 1966 he bought it. He actually ordered it, and we'll get into that when I get into the car inside. But very, very impressive stuff, and it's got, we'll get into the exterior styling for a moment. It's got slab sides, which were very reminiscent of this guy, Elwood Engel. You may or may not have heard of him. He was the chief designer of Chrysler at the time. He was headhunted from GM. He got a raw deal at GM and moved over to Chrysler. And he was the chief designer. He went on to oversee the bulk, if not actually the totality, truly, of all the very famous Chrysler muscle cars, from, you know, this one to the GTX to the Charger to the Superbird. All of them. He was responsible for it, and he was a pretty cool cat. He just ended up overseeing the totality of Mopar muscle car evolution. You had tall greenhouses. You can see it's got quite a bit of visibility. You've got angular body lines, very, very sharp, very creased, not a lot of curves in them, very space racy, if you will. You know, it was meant to look quite modern at the time. And you've got this distinctive tapering rear hood line. There was a Belvedere I, which makes me think that Henry Ford had something to do with the way these things were named, but that one came in kind of a box top roof, if you will, while this one had the tapered rear, which is actually quite cool. And the wagons also had tapered rears, which looked good, and it was a neat styling cue at the time. You had a big body line running the length of the car. This side you've got this Plymouth logo. On the other side it's hidden gas cap, so it's kind of neat. The guy who ordered this one was pretty racy, so he got dog dish hubcaps, which looked terrific, and you know, really made this thing kind of a you know, street rod, if you will. The chrome bumpers are tucked in nicely. This is, of course, before 5-mile-an-hour bumpers. You've got a nice stainless trim package running across the length of the trunk. You've got two pretty standard segmented taillights. Here's what I'm talking about with the fuel cap. Let's have a look at that. So you can go into this and pull it out, and I think that's just a very neat feature, and also, frankly, a lot nicer than trying to dick around with having it behind the license plate down low. Nice big rear window, nice big impact strip down the side, nice chrome door handle pulls, nothing down there on the rocker panels. Again, the body color paint, steel wheels with the dog dish, looks terrific. Two round headlamps up front with two parking lamps. Simplicity personified, very, very simple. And, you know, as a result, they became extremely popular with fleet operations. The police absolutely loved these things because you could order them with the 383 and a torque flight, which was a lot of horsepower for the car at the time. The sedans were quite roomy while at the same time being an intermediate platform. And I believe the first Adam 12, that TV show, the pilot had Belvederes as the kind of the standard sedan of the LA Police Department. So all in all, I would call it a little bit minimalist and frankly a little bit clever. We'll get into the trunk. Let's do that. I see the windshield with the aluminum surrounds. This thing is a real time machine. It's just unbelievably well preserved, which you get when you find one that, you know, had only one owner. So anyway, let's have a look inside. Being a Chrysler, we have the upside down tumbler. Let's see, it's an absolutely enormous trunk. And again, not just the police, but the taxi guys like this because you could fit a bunch of crap. You could have an entire daycare center in here. You could have like 20 kids inside the trunk, close it down gently, and they're going to be just fine if the weather is good. I don't see the spare tire in here, which is interesting, so probably should have one. But otherwise, it's a nice, big, proper trunk. You've got some kind of a little electronics box up there that I don't entirely understand. You've got the jack stowed over here. You've got the original jack sticker, which is nice. The light still works, and everything looking pretty good inside the trunk. So there it is. And that was a big part of what made these particular cars popular, was their space. We'll have a look under the hood. And frankly, this is just much more important. And it's nice. Oh God, it's heavy to lift, but At least it's easy to get into. So here it is. This is a 383 4-barrel. It was very, very cool to see this as part of the option package on this car, along with the 4-speed, and makes it quite neat. But otherwise, you could just say that the engines in this car was what made them so popular. You know, through this intermediate Belvedere line from 62 to, oh, I don't know, 1970, there were a variety of engines. There was a 225 slant 6. You could get small blocks, the 273 and the 318, and then you could get into the big blocks like the 361, the 383, and even a 426 Hemi, which a fair amount of these 66 Belvederes were, and they're shockingly expensive now, of course, and Richard Petty just absolutely loved him. He ran him to NASCAR fame as it made Richard Petty basically these Hemi-powered Mopars, and getting into the Superbirds and stuff. It basically made his whole career. And of course, there was also the 440, which was not a Hemi engine. It was quite big. There was the Torque Flight transmission, a pretty bulletproof automatic. There was a 3-speed manual that they'd had for a while and was pretty good. But it was the A833 4-speed, which came out a couple of years before, which featured... It was a huge key to the muscle car world. Chrysler needed a 4-speed. They ended up building this A833, and it became legendary. And it was used in basically all of the very famous Mopar muscle cars right up until the end. So an exceptional transmission in this car. Under the hood of this thing, you can see just how original it is. It's exceptional. I mean, the guy's done, he added a sun tack with this giant 60s sending unit. It doesn't really work very well. Here you can see the original VIN plate on the car, which is quite cool. Even cooler is this original vehicle Certicard, which is basically Chrysler's version of the protector plate. And you can see it's made out in the guy's name, who the current title is in. So it just makes this a documentable one-owner car, which is absolutely strange and rare to find in today's world. So a 66 that the guy hung on to since new, you really have to give him credit for that. Even still has the original iron manifolds on it. You know, a lot of people would have just put headers on it over the years. It's really a miracle to see this car in this condition. Looks like a Carter 4-barrel, probably a replacement. I took a bunch of parts out of the back of this thing. The original carb is probably amongst them. But either way, the air cleaner, the valve covers, everything looks really original and nice on this car, which is just absolutely insane, down to the original hood sponge on it, which looks great. So very, very cool stuff. You do have front wishbones, you know, torsion bars, the very traditional Chrysler front end suspension. It's a unibody design going into rear leaf springs with a I can't remember what they call it, Sure Track or something. It's a posi rear end in this thing, and very, very cool overall. So you could just order this car as meek as you wanted to, or as powerful as you wanted to. I mean, from a 225 slant 6 with an open diff all the way up to a 426 Hemi with very, very, you know, short street gears. So it was a pretty neat thing, and they did quite well on the NASCAR circuit, and of course also the drag race circuit. So I just love looking under the hood of this car. Anyway, I'm going to pause it there for a minute, then we're going to hop inside, have a look at how it is in there, and go for a spin. So bear with me one moment. Alright, you can see I've got all my crap inside, and it barely makes a dent in the trunk space. So absolutely great stuff. That was a bag of stuff that the guy had in there, along with all the other spare parts and whatnot. And again, I don't know if I mentioned it, but this car is going to be at the Premier Auction on December 2nd and 3rd in Punta Gorda. So, you know, have a look, see what you think. It's going to be up on their website here today, and it'll be for sale. And I think it's a pretty incredible find. I mean, it's very rare to find one of these things in a one-owner status that's documentable with 66,000 actual miles. So I have very high hopes that this is going to do well, and, you know, frankly, it should. It was a tough car to find. It was a tough car to acquire, and I did end up with it. But let's have a look inside. You can see that this is a hardtop coupe. I love the way that the windows are encased in chrome, but they do go down. So this big angular back window goes down, as does the front. There's no B-pillar, and you have a nice big open side, almost like a convertible. I left all the stickers that the guy put on. I mean, they're ancient. I thought it would be cool to put on. You get skied, you got Pray for Surf, you got another surf shop sticker. This was all done in a very 60s style. And the guy who owned it before he passed away had just turned 80. He also worked on a freighter and had a thing for Australia, but it's just kind of neat to see the car in this condition. And I figured, what the hell, I'm going to leave it that way. You're talking original paint, original interior. The seat, as you can see, has some tears in it, but I didn't want to mess with it because, again, this is the way that it came, and I think that's pretty cool. The door panels are a nice, simple affair. I don't think this guy went crazy on the option package. He just wanted speed, and we'll get into that. I forgot to bring all the crap with me, but I'm going to pause and do that from a remote location later. But anyway, nice, easy door panel. You have the door pull right here, nice little armrest, window crank. You got these great little smoking windows. In the back seat, you've got tons of room for your Canadians. You can fit 3 across there with no issue at all. There's the original Plymouth format, which is incredible to see, and just everything looking great. Up front, you've got a bench seat. You've got that big 4 on the floor, which looks unbelievably cool. Very neat to see it ordered that way. The guy put in a Sun Tech, which is neat and very period correct, and some other stuff, which we'll get into. So anyway, let's hop in and see what we got. Alright, so to fire it up, we're going to put the key in the tumbler upside down, Chrysler style. I get corrected on that. They tell me it's correct. And the 383 fires to life, and it sounds fantastic. I love the way the hood ornament has a 383 badge on it facing the driver. You won't actually see it facing the front. It's just on the driver's view. And it makes me think that this car was almost right on the precipice of bling versus true lightweight muscle cars, which is kind of neat. You also got pretty good gauges here. You got your temp gauge. You got a fuel gauge, of course. Here's the Sun Super Tech, which he installed in the correct location, but it does kind of block the instrument cluster. There you can see it does have 66,000 actual miles. There's the alternator gauge, draw and charge. You got an oil pressure idiot light and your climate control right here. Down there, to do away with the idea of having an idiot light, he added in amps, which is nice, but more importantly, you've got your oil pressure. Beside that, you've got a Reverb-O-Matic, which is pretty cool add-on for the ear, which sort of enhanced the AM radio, which is a Plymouth Trans Audio, which has, of course, different connotations today. You got this big 4-speed shifter on the floor. I don't believe this is the original shift knob, but it's cool and it's nice to use. You also have a T-handle underneath it to get in reverse, which is, yeah, it's just pretty neat stuff. This is a 1963 high school tassel, which means that this was probably the dude's. He put it up there when it was new and bought the car in '66, so he was 21 years old. He knew what he wanted. I found 2 purchase orders in the car. One was this car with a potential 426 Hemi, and then one with the 383 4-speed. And from what I've read, the 426 was running into availability issues in '66, so he may just have decided to go with the 383, which is probably why I ended up with it. So I'm not going to cry. If the thing had a Hemi in it, I probably wouldn't have had a shot. You got a very nice frameless day-night mirror, and I tell you what I'm going to do. Here's Belvedere II script on the glove box. You can see we have a little Chrysler part in here. Here's where I would have had all the crap that I wanted to show you about the car's documentation, but I left it at the office. So I'm going to pause here. When I get to the office, I'm going to inject it and then carry on. So hold on one moment. Alright, so here through the time-space universe is the part that I would have done if I'd bothered to put the stuff inside the car, which I meant to, but we can inject this in now. So here's the stuff that I got with this car, which is pretty phenomenal. You know, you often see these things come with their original you know, whatever the hell you call it, the brochure for the car. But in this particular case, this is actually where the guy did have the brochure, along with the build sheet, or at least when he ordered the car, the window sticker, which is pretty amazing on a 66. He saved the carburetor tags, which is cool. Here's the original dealer, you know, owner's manual envelope that has some oil change. The title and his name matches the car order. There were 2 orders, actually. Here's the other one. This is kind of interesting. It looks like he ordered this car a month earlier, which is all basically the same with the exception of a Hemi, which would have been pretty cool. I remember there were some availability issues with Hemi in 66, so they may have called back and said, hey, we can't get you one. What do you want to do? And he came up with the 383, or the Hemi came in as too expensive, one of the two. So this car was not meant to be. This one was, and now we have it here. So it's just fascinating to see all the stuff. We got some receipts. This made it look, I got excited thinking the car was a cover story for Mopar magazine, but turns out this is one he had made up or something as a little glamour puss thing, and, you know, whatever goes with the car. But anyway, very, very neat to see, and all very cool stuff. So this should have been in the glove box, will be, but here's where I inject a little video into this particular car. Thanks again. All right, so there it is. Hopefully I've been able to get in the documents that I think make this car really, really cool. Sun visor's a simple affair, very tightened together, very nice. The headrest looks great, or the headliner. I don't see any cocaine mirrors. That wasn't really a thing in the 60s. And the sun tack appears to have a kind of a screwed up sender. It's, you know, telling me we're at almost 8,000 RPMs, which obviously we're not. So anyway, let's get this thing in first and go for a spin. The car also has a pretty good pull to the right. You know, I'm running out of time. I've got like 10 cars that I need to get to this auction, and I've got about 0 of them finished. So this one was close enough. I'm going to send it to Alexa, the transsexual mechanic, to align it, and hopefully that's going to make it perfect. But I didn't want to just delay another day, so when I'm driving this thing, you're going to see it as a pretty hard pull to the left, and frankly, I just don't care. It is what it is. By the time it runs through that Premier auction, we'll have that fixed. I'm going to stop for a minute. Let's see if we can catch a little bit of posse. And yes, we can. Becomes very hard to shift with this pull. Otherwise, I just use my knee to hold the wheel straight, but that becomes pretty difficult when it's such a hard pull to the left. Oh, for the love of God. But anyway, it's a nice, smooth shifting 4-speed, which is, you know, what you want in this thing. I mean, what a cool ordering package to get this thing with the 383 4-speed and the posse in the back. What a neat car. And man, does it drive cool. No power steering. You know, you got to kind of fight it unless you're rolling, which a lot of people don't get that. You know, they try to turn the wheel while the car is stopped. It's much, much easier to turn the wheel while the car is rolling. And it just goes down the road kind of nice, with the exception of the intense leftward pull, which should be fixed fairly soon, and frankly is an impediment to this video, because I know I'd be able to shift it pretty nice without that, but I don't want to veer into oncoming traffic or this poor guy who's trying to not have a heart attack. So, all right, let's get it back into first and see what we got. What a shifting 4-speed. So anyway, there it is. I mean, this thing is a ton of fun. 1966 Belvedere II. You know, honestly, kind of a very, very important part of the evolution of the muscle car. And most notable, I think, because of the availability of a 426 Hemi, which of course became the definitive engine of the whole muscle car era, more than just about anything else. I mean, you know, that is an epic, epic engine, and these cars did come with that, so that was a pretty important thing. That said, this 383 Big Rock 4-barrel ain't bad, and it is fun to hear the secondaries open wide and go down the road. So anyway, if you have an interest in this thing, it'll be at the at that Premier auction. I'll put a link in the description. I got more fun stuff coming up, but at least I got this thing going. I've been trying to for a while. So thank you very much for having a look. Really, really appreciate it. And we will see you with the next one. Take care.